Okay, so let's look at these building plans. Government plans to allow developers to build shoebox apartments with no minimum floor area or balcony requirements are being slammed by building experts. The government is set to remove restrictions and make it more attractive to build houses, townhouses and tiny shoebox apartments. So the restrictions come off. In the first part of this year, almost 10,000 new migrants a month were making their way into Auckland. Yet just 1,600 homes every month were completed. They got the final certificate. But AUT's Professor of Construction, John Tookey, says the small apartments could generate some absolutely squalid living conditions, he says. He joins us now from sunny Rarotonga to tell us how it's going to affect our cities. John, sorry to bother you on your holiday, mate, but g'day and good morning. What do you make of these plans?
Well, the devil's going to be in the detail with all of this sort of stuff. Obviously, how much is it going to end up really being a micro apartments, tiny shoebox type things? Is there a sufficient elasticity in the interest in that particular market space for investors to actually invest in that construction process? But I think the package of all of these various different measures, including the sort of elimination of the town oblique rural boundary and all this sort of stuff, has all sorts of potential problems associated with it, primarily infrastructural.
With I'll stay with the apartments for now, but I do want to get on to another couple of issues there. But the apartments, how small could they go? I mean, I used to live in a 55 square metre apartment in Wellington. It was fine. It was designed pretty well. But are we talking 20 square metres?
I think it's not likely to go that small, but worst case scenario, if you've ever been to any of the major sort of development areas, the likes of Mumbai and Shanghai and Beijing and all these sorts of, and Hong Kong and so on, you have these tiny apartments, and you end up with a scenario, if you let it go that way, it's literally one room living, where you're going to cook, you're going to eat, you're going to sleep, you're going to do go to the toilet, you're going to be having a shower, you're going to be doing all these things literally in a single space, and it can be absolutely appalling.
Yeah, well, New Zealand's a country of 5.2 million people. Is it really necessary to build like this? I mean, do we really need to build like this? This is not Bangladesh, as you say. It's not Mumbai. This is not Southeast Asia. This is New Zealand.
Is it absolutely necessary? I'd argue probably not. But at the same time, what you've got to recognise is the fact that there's always going to be a market for literally the minimal necessary to be able to get onto the housing market and get into a situation where you're actually owning a mortgage and doing all those sorts of things. Yeah, should it be necessary? I hope not. Unfortunately, I fear that we're going to go that way. The only caveat is, knowing how the market works in New Zealand, it's going to take years and years until such time as we start to see the worst potential effects. And all I'd say is, the worst case scenario type of vertical slum type of situations, I sense is not likely to be a significant problem.
With these plans, the government's clearly doing it to get some momentum going again in the development sector and in the housing sector. Do you expect to see these sorts of apartments in Auckland? Don't we have these sorts of apartments in places like Auckland anyway, these shoebox type apartments?
There are some that were built back in the day, which are tiny sort of spaces for sure, no question. As I say, there's a residual drag effect associated with any new development process. Developers are only going to go where the market is, and they make significant coin associated with the process of construction. And when you're dealing with the vast majority of constructors being one-man bands who basically produce one house at a time type of outcomes, you're not going to see those sorts of outcomes. It's only actually for the big developments of a multi-story building with tiny floor areas associated with the construction process. And as I say, I do not believe that this is going to dominate the market. There's not going to be a wall of these things, thousands and thousands and thousands. It's not going to go that way, and I think also the market is unlikely to get too excited about it. Generally, they're going to be seen as not necessarily buy-ins, except to buy-to-let.
So why would the government then change the law allowing for it then? Because once you allow for something, behaviours can change.
They can, for sure, but what we're dealing with here is the classic sort of short-term polemic opportunity. We're going to create all of this new construction that's going to take place. The reality is we've got thousands of acres of construction. Nothing's happening because it's been land banked. It sits there waiting to be developed for the vast majority of properties on the peripheries. You go out to any of the major development areas in Auckland, for instance, in the north and in the south and in the northwest. And again, thousands of sections, but only a handful on available for sale. And the reason being that developers are seeking to sustain prices by only releasing a drip feed of these sections for the market for development purposes. So, the market is being manipulated across the board. And I do not see that we're going to see this wall of development, because it presupposes that there's going to be a developer step in, front end this, and actually seek to make millions, whatever.
That land banking. That land banking. Is there anything the government can do about that, or successive governments? Because we've struggled to get on top of that. And land banking basically means that the developer sits on it, keep the prices up, and releases it gently and quietly and when they like, and that just keeps prices up.
It sustains the crazy sort of figures. Can you do anything about it? Yeah, you can introduce what we call a use it or lose it clause, where it's a case of, okay, you've got your consent on this, you've got to use it within a particular time frame in order to be able to maintain it, and if you don't use it, then you're going to have to reapply for it, and that introduces a censure on the developer to make sure that they actually use it, or otherwise they're going to have to pay again for it. So it is possible to do these things if there's a willingness. But again, you're presupposing that government's going to be keen on being, I don't know, what's the word, innovative, and thinking ahead of the market and what have you. And historically, we've had multiple governments who've failed to do this.
Yeah. The changes overall, though, what's your take on it? They really are trying to remove restrictions, fast track legislation coming as well. They really are trying to move the market, aren't they?
Well, they're having a go. Okay, give it a nudge, knock yourself out, as they say. But the thing that stops development going forward is actually the infrastructure associated with supporting these new peripheral zones that are going out to the edge of the cities. And so, if you haven't got the road infrastructure, if you haven't got doctor's surgeries, you haven't got hospitals nearby, you haven't got stormwater reticulation detail, all this sort of stuff needs to be put in place.
Yeah.
There's no ifs, buts, or maybes, and it's not necessarily going to be dealt with by some sort of developer levy, which tends to lag dramatically behind the demand for construction.
John, back to your holiday. I appreciate your time on the program. All the best, mate. Thank you very much.
No worries at all.
Okay,
Thank you.
Duncan, Garner.